Which jobs has, hands down, the worst impact on mental health? My dad is an oncologist. He handles it well, but that has to be up there. Every time you meet a new patient, it's during one of the worst, if not the worst, time of their lives. And it's up to you to break it to them/their families if the toxic treatment you have been administering is working, or if they should give up hope and get their affairs in order. On top of that, you have them attending appointments telling you the kind of toll the cancer is taking on their marriage. So many people walk away from their beloved partner of 30 years rather than support them through this, not to mention their finances. I am still so unbelievably grateful to the oncologist who helped my father understand he was terminal. My dad was endlessly optimistic, religious, and not particularly intelligent. Sorry, Dad. When his original oncologist tried to tell him he was terminal, he refused to give up hope. It was when he was hospitalized due to complications that a resident oncologist at the hospital came and sat with him for a good long time and finally got him to understand that it was time to let go of that belief he might get better. I can't imagine what it does to a person to sit and make sure that someone understands there is no hope left in the world for them. I'm so grateful people like that exist, but it definitely couldn't be me. Veterinarians have some of the highest rates of taking their own lives amongst any other jobs. I'm going with that. My vet cried with me when we put my cat to sleep. I was touched, but it was a bit of a surprise since I was apparently the second euthanasia appointment of the day. What I hear from vets is that the people are the worst part of the job. Seeing evidence of neglect or abuse, clients refusing to pay for necessary medical interventions, etc. Watching animals suffering is hard enough, but knowing you, or the owner, could do something about it but can't/won't has to be rough. First responders will eventually watch a person die right in front of them more than likely. Definitely, have seen multiple die, as well as plenty of already dead, brains on walls, etc. None of it was nearly as bad as responding to a dying infant than having to stand around while EMS is going through the motions for the sake of the parents. Just for clarification, no judgment here, just making sure I understand you correctly. You're saying sometimes EMTs know an infant has died, or is in the process of dying, and there's nothing the EMTs can do, so they go through the motions, or perform life-saving measures just so the parents see the EMTs tried something, rather than just state the inevitable: the child has died/is going to die. With children especially, you have to try interventions. I am an ER nurse and I had a young child less than 2 years old who drowned and was suspected to have been in the pool for approximately 2 hours. The child was cold as ice, but we still have to do all the things. The FBI evidence sifters in child cases. Weeks of freeze-framing children's faces during abuse videos and matching that to databases to identify the kids against other videos, missing children, etc., then putting it all in a timeline for prosecutors. Edit to add, they have to watch these videos looping back over and over to record audio, names, places, numbers, background noises, and any other evidence that might connect persons to acts or cases to other cases. I knew someone whose spouse worked in that area. Apparently they are managed to spend a lot of time on the job to maintaining their mental health. Like they have days where they'll do outdoor activities and such. Hopefully that helps them, because that's a fucking brutal job. Mine doesn't deserve top 10, but I worked at in Payday Loan's place for a few months. If that didn't feel like legally working for the devil, I don't know what does. My mom used to work for one of these places. She got fired for turning people away who obviously wouldn't be able to pay them back. That's their secret cap: no one is able to pay them back. You just keep renewing the loan until you lose your house. There were just really egregious examples of it that she used to share. It's disgusting how many of them exist in the depressed neighborhoods. Pretty sure they got legislated out of the area not long after she got fired. Crime scene cleanup. Entire families, murders, etc. Seeing dead kids would wreck me. The smells, bodies turned to soup, brains splattered, blood, lots of blood, fecal matter, pets taking a chomp because they haven't been fed. Having to pull all carpet, pad and scrubbing subfloors. Extracting body juices. High probability of bio-illnesses/biohazards, blood/airborne pathogens. 100% will affect any sane person. I remember there was a guy who did that for a living and would post photos and write-ups on his personal blog back in the early 2000s. I'll never forget the one where he responded to the home on an old man who had a heart attack and died while taking a bath. The man lived in a cabin in the woods and the water was heated via propane burners which had been left on for days/weeks until his remains were found. The cleanup guy wrote that he and the local police tried to pull the body out of the water, but his leg bones pulled right out of flesh, as the old man had essentially been turned to soup from sitting in hot water for so long. They ended up scooping his remains out with buckets. I have a friend who works for CPS. You wouldn't believe the number of times she's tried to get a child taken out of a horribly abusive home. Clear physical evidence of SA etc., but the case falls through because the police won't provide a detective who is good with children, then the child won't repeat accusations for official testimony. It's gotta be up there with first responders. My brother worked for CPS as a caseworker for almost 8 years, which is about 6 years longer than people typically last. He shared some about his job in conversations with me, but I know he kept a lot of the worst stuff to himself. I'm fully convinced the job played a large part in his path to drugs that eventually took his life. Psychiatric nurse in the psychiatric inpatient hospital. In a state prison. Dealing with death row inmates. An old family friend was a prison psychiatrist. Many times she canceled on dinner plans with us because she couldn't get rid of the smell of human shit that was hurled at her at work, and the number of times she'd been told to stay home because a plan to kill her or to assault her had been found or uncovered. It didn't really hit home how hard the job was until I heard some of her, albeit minor by comparison, stories. She's an on-call mental health psychiatrist now. She deals with people who try everything in their power to kill themselves. As safer as she feels in the new job, it's not any easier by any stretch of the imagination. Caregiver. First, the racist. It's very hard to go on your day taking care of someone who spits in your face and calls you dirty while you're trying to help them wash up. Second, the way people just die after you finally had a relationship with them and cared for them for months, and how fast that empty bed gets occupied. You don't get any counseling or therapy, but you're expected to go on normally with your work shift. Call center rep. When my husband worked for a call center for fraud claims, it made him severely depressed because he would have elders calling about fraud, usually grandkids stealing their money, and the system is so corrupt that they usually can't legally do anything. And the grandparents are now broke. It took a huge toll on his mental health hearing people cry about having no money to feed their children due to fraud. Combat soldier. Nothing destroys the human psyche like the constant stress of combat and being in combat zones. I am in one of those weird professions where you spend time in conflict zones or close by, humanitarian aid. Even without the combat aspect, but with a lot of stress, it is insanely traumatizing. About 4 in 5 have PTSD or STS. I have found, despite demographics being really different, that there are things I have more in common with soldiers than people who have never been in a field. I also have 2-for-1 deal of those two disorders. Definitely not number 1, but lawyer who does family law. Good friend of mine did it for a while. He said that all of his clients were simply deep down angry, and their anger and bitterness overrode their normal sense of reason. They won't listen to the lawyers very much, and will behave totally irrationally at times no matter what. I don't know if it's the worst, but maybe. I'm a retired detective. In the latter part of my career, I was tasked with running our Special Investigations Unit. One of our responsibilities was computer crimes. 95% of those were SA media investigations involving minors, CP to the lay person. I trained and got certified in computer forensics. As a result, I spent many hours poring through thousands upon thousands of child SA images and videos. The seething, white rage that would build up inside of me would necessitate an occasional break to go punch a wall or other inanimate object. The other detectives outside of our enclosed lab got used to the occasional outbursts by my other computer forensic examiners and me. Most of the time I could endure it, but sometimes certain acts or victims would trigger rage in me that still affects me to this day. This in spite of the mandatory and regular therapy for our examiners that was established by policy. There is no redemption for people who abuse children. I am currently in this position, except I'm not an officer, just a civilian working for my state's police agency in their lab. Been doing this job for 5 years now. After going through enough of the content on a daily basis, I've been desensitized to most of it. However, when the cases are production cases rather than simple possession/distribution, they'll tend to get to me a little more. Probably because these are kids that are, relatively, right up the road. Especially if I was the examiner on scene during the search warrant. Maybe slaughterhouse worker. Bit of a second-hand story, but I dated a girl. In her hometown, the slaughterhouse was a big employer that paid well. Apparently they had X number of what are basically mental health days, and this was 20 years ago, before the kind of thing was more top of mind, because people would have breakdowns or just walk off in the middle of a shift. Rather than fire these people or have them assume they can't come back, they just gave them a bit of paid time for it. The people who pick up the phone when you call 911. They have to endure mostly horrible calls, listen to people die, or people calling with someone they love dying in front of them. And when it's over, they hang up and answer the next call and start over. There's some great YouTube videos on just how bad it is. My sister was a 911 dispatcher. It was really hard on her. Sure, she didn't see all the things the cops did, but she said she often felt so helpless. She's the only person on the phone while the distraught mother begs for them to hurry because her son is dying, or while the woman is hiding in the closet because there's an intruder in the house and she can hear him coming. Oftentimes they are there for the worst moments with no one else to comfort them, and usually don't even know the ending, like if they live or if the cops make it in time. It's also a lot of pressure. If they mess up, like relaying an address or something, it's on them and them alone. This pales in comparison to the first comment, but here's one. Probation/parole officers. We get to know their whole families. We cheer them on when they succeed. We move heaven and earth to put things in place for success. No one talks about it, but when they pass away to violence and drugs, it hurts. I don't know if people truly know how bad the fentanyl crisis is. I would guess social media content moderator. You live in a developing country, get paid tiny wages, and all day long you are looking at the worst images that humanity has created. Violence, child material, gore, everything wrong with humanity. How long can your psyche last intact? And you can't quit and get a better job, because they choose places where the labor is cheap already, so there are many other jobs to choose from. You also can't phone it in. Your job requires cognitive engagement with what is on your screen, and requires decisions. Mental health care for children, especially when the parents don't do anything we suggested. The kids work so hard to be successful in the sessions, and when they came back again, you can see the parents did nothing that was being taught to help the kids. It was frustrating and really sad to see. Any job where every day you are constantly being exposed to other people's trauma. Second-hand trauma day in and day out wears on mental health. Thank you for saying this. Second-hand trauma and the compassion fatigue that goes with it are so real. I worked as an English professor in one of the poorest parts of the US, and I experienced the worst depressive episode of my life. I completely burned out after 2 years. There were only so many essays I could read about SA, poverty, and incarceration. Just look at the top rates of people taking their lives. Doctors are up there, which is odd because they're among the most coveted professions on earth. Coveted because the average person is entirely unaware of the suffering, expense, and time investment that goes into it. If people really knew, they'd know they'd probably be better off as electricians. They don't even make that much money in the long run. 4 years of bachelor's plus 4 years of med school plus 5-ish years of residency plus optional 2 to 3 years of fellowship if you want to get into some of the best paying fields. That's 13 to 15 years of not making any money, or working insane hours for peanuts. So by the time you start to make real money, you are on average around 32-ish years old. Add about 2 years of your pay going to paying off your medical school debt completely, you actually start making money at around 34 years old. You should also consider that doctors get paid more depending on how remote their clinic/hospital is. So you might need to live in bumfuck Alabama if you want to make the big bucks. If you are disciplined enough for med school, you'd probably be able to get a job straight out of college in well-paying firms in other fields. If you were to get into any other high-paying field like finance, big law, software engineering, consulting, IT, etc., you'd probably be about halfway to retirement and savings, have your own house, and have a senior role that pays similarly to a new doctor at age 32 to 34. If you do the rate of interest analysis, being a doctor is not worth it unless you really like medicine. It's not something you should do for the money aspect. I found desk jobs with ridiculously long hours to be doozies. I've also worked in the trades. Working hard physically helps your overall health. Sitting in a desk looking at computers for 12+ hours regularly was the least healthy thing I've ever done. Wildland firefighters, no one really talks about it, but since it's a part of my field of study, my instructor who's been on a few hotshot crews and knows so many people in the wildland firefighting industry who have just ended their lives. You work 14 hours days for 2 weeks or more of some of the most physically demanding work anyone can do. Usually can't shower. You're actively watching nature, including all its creatures being burned alive, moving their corpses, and possibly watching it destroy people's homes and lives. Not only that, but at any moment something can change and you'll burn alive in the fire too. It's not for the weak of heart, because even those who have the toughest hearts are struggling with depression. Therapist. Listening to people's problems for 8 hours every day will be extremely taxing. Therapist here. You're not wrong, it's taxing AF. When you start thinking about how many people's lives and their issues you hold, it actually brings on major anxiety. All while dealing with your own lives and personal struggles, including our own mental health. It's wild. Self-care and combating burnout is not something they focus enough time on in grad school. You hit the field basically blindsided because your practicums were easy AF, and then all of a sudden, people. Documentation, mandated reporting, referrals, your agency's policies, ethics, liability insurance, continuing education credits. Yeah, it's a lot. Does it have its rewards? Absolutely. Still a difficult job. That's why many of us have our own therapists. I'm actually shocked I had to scroll this far to see this. Social workers too, but therapists have it brutal as well. I've heard trucking is really bad. Read about it in an article recently. They have to be away from home for days, if not weeks at a time. It's really difficult to hold down a relationship or family in any way. A good portion of their time on the job is spent in a perpetual state of exhaustion. Coffee, Red Bull and other caffeinated beverages are being used 24/7 to keep them awake long enough to finish the trip. Never a good night's rest as you just sleep in whatever motel you find along the road, or just in the cabin of your vehicle. Not to mention that driving a vehicle for that long is physically exhausting. Imagine holding your arms up in front of you for 6 to 8 hours a day, every day of the week. It's not the worst, but my mother used to deliver Meals on Wheels. It's a program in the good states to deliver food to the elderly or homebound. She saved a few people in distress and found her share of dead folks, which sucks. She was often the only person some of those people would see each day. It was heartbreaking, and she did it when she was even eligible to receive the meals as she was elderly. I lost her to COVID because stupid people ran our country. It's not the worst. See first responders and, apparently, veterinarians, but being an inner-city public school teacher broke me. Look, again, not as bad as those others, but I've seen and read enough that my decade in has been enough. I've had students murdered. One kid was shot for $12 worth of weed. I also taught the murderer. I've called DCS on many parents because my student came in beaten or starving. I paid for one of my students' lunches because she was pregnant and couldn't afford school lunch. Seen brutal fights that have ended with hospitalization, and have also been hospitalized due to breaking up fights. You watch brilliant students discover drugs and odd. You see kids with bright futures get pregnant and refuse to go to college because they will be supported by the baby's father who skipped town the day she gave birth. And you see kids fall through the cracks in the system to never be seen again. I've also reported 2 fucking pervert teachers. One didn't have enough evidence, but he was still let go, while the other currently enjoys prison. My first year, a few of us teachers started a club that would have lock-ins at the school because some of the kids needed a place to get food, get clean, and be away from the danger of home. I've never played more Monopoly in my life or eaten more Papa John's, and I really didn't like doing it, but it was worth it at graduation when one of my students that never missed club thanked me because it was the one night her mom's boyfriend couldn't get her. I still cry about it. I'm crying now. There were amazing positives. I have a few students that are now doctors that were once told that they would never graduate. Dating kids who couldn't read at the beginning of their freshman year to graduate with a full ride to college is a feeling that I can't really compare to anything. But, at the end of the day, the lows are too low. I left the first school that I taught at 6 years ago because we had an incident that definitely wasn't a school shooting that failed only because the kid turned the corner directly into our school officer and, out of fear, the kid killed himself instead of the kids on his list. I should have left then, but I thought it would get better, that I could handle it all. I can't. I'm tired. Update, this got bigger than I thought possible. Thank you all for reaching out. I've been trying to interact and comment on all of the posts. First things first, you do not need to thank me. I'm a singular voice in a sea of Title I teachers, and you can find them also in the comments. We all have stories like this, both incredibly positive and less so. To the people wanting updates, the girl who I helped feed is doing well and has 2 beautiful kids. I haven't heard from the girl in club, and I hope she has found peace. Also, I've been trying to stay vague enough that I couldn't really be ID'd, but I have had one former student DM me and they got my name right. If you are curious if I taught you, DM me and I can tell you if I did or not. Also, my school was in the rural Midwest. This seems to be very important for a few people.